Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. I was approached a few weeks ago by someone from another channel who wanted to do a short little talk on our respective experiences in education and on the various kinds of social justice, feminism, that sort of thing that were kind of infusing that education. And so we wound up having a nice little discussion, and we decided that the best way to present this discussion would be to divide it in half and present each piece on our own channels. So this piece is the second half of the discussion. So if you'd like to see the first half, I'll definitely be linking that video in the low bar, as well as a link to his channel so you can check out his videos. Also, this will not be being put in my Patreon feed or anything like that, because this is just a little discussion kind of separate from everything that I'm doing, so feel free to just listen and enjoy. Here you go.
Depending on who you are.
Yeah, and that has basically been my experience for the past several weeks. Like I'm only partway through the first year right now, but it's the second class that I knew was going to be an absolutely miserable experience. When you have a class called Socio-Cultural and Systemic Influences, you know you're in for some shit.
Then you're in for a treat.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and this is what I've been starting to do videos on. It's just almost every aspect of this class has been just completely marinated in this stuff. The textbooks, the talking points, the lesson plans, the assignments, the rubric for marking said assignments. I
watched a few of your videos on that, and didn't you at one point just flip open a page in the book and you mark down every time they used the word oppression or oppressed or something like that?
Yes, I had a textbook that was covering different counseling points, and every time, when I got to the feminist therapy chapter, in massive finger quotes, I just counted. I counted the most common word in that chapter, other than obvious things like was oppression. It was in there 43 times in, I think it was less than 30 pages. It's like, okay, none of the other theories talked anything about oppression, so where is this coming from?
You should be oppressed. They should, that's what they should rename the course to. Oppressors versus opprevees or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like how your differences from not being white and male makes you oppressed, and why you should be upset about it.
Yeah, I have all the privilege, a white male.
Yeah, well, I mean, being a white woman myself, I am definitely getting up there,
Oh yeah, white women have it pretty well. I mean,
I think so. Generally speaking. But,
generally speaking, yes.
Yeah, but
oh.
I've been basically trying to challenge this where I can. Like in the discussion forums, I say, it's pointless to make these broad sweeping generalizations about groups, because like they said, they're talking about this whole intersectionality thing. There are different points of intersecting oppression, whatever. And it's like, I can use that back on you, because in saying that all these people have different intersections that might make their lives harder or easier, you shouldn't be making assumptions about white men, because they might have plenty of intersections that, lead them to have problems in life, lead them to have difficulties that should be addressed. So we should treat people based on their individuality. We shouldn't try and put them in boxes.
Yeah, exactly. And nowadays, especially because the spectrum is it has so many dimensions. You have gender, and then the gender is fluid, and you have colored people, you have sexuality, I mean, at the end of the day, don't you just become an individual anyway? Honestly.
Yeah.
After all those boxes?
I think so. Also, I think they prefer person of color.
Yeah.
I think that's the PC way of saying it these days, which it does seem kind of strange, but I mean, whatever, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like for example, one of the assignments that I have to do for this class is a cultural interview. And the way they phrased it is really interesting. They're basically like, try to interview somebody from a culture that you might be unfamiliar with or less comfortable with. And it's like,
Ooh, you could interview me, Swedish culture. Hell yeah.
there you go. And it's like implying that I'm less comfortable with other cultures. They're really obsessed with trying to find biases that you hold towards other people. And it's like, I am a grown-ass woman. I have had no problems treating people equally despite their skin color or despite their religion or anything else like that. I really don't think that I, going into a master's program, need to be taught how to treat people equally based on not external features, just because they're human beings and they deserve to be treated with human decency and kindness. I don't think that I need to be taught that thing. I think I've kind of figured that out by now. That's why I'm going in for counseling. It's very, very patronizing.
It's very patronizing. It's like they're waving their finger like, you should think about this, like you're probably biased too and you don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. And you got to know your biases, because otherwise they might secretly come out in your counseling, and it's like, oh my god.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so
obviously
this cultural interview assignment that I have to do, it's kind of gross, because now I have to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go and interview my Muslim friend, rather than just I'm going to go interview a friend from work. It's like, why do I have to put her in that box? That's never been a defining feature in how I see or treat her. But no, now
it's just a person who happens to be Muslim, and it's usually the way I see it. I mean, it doesn't really define you per se. It's very strange way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we work together, right? Like, it's not something that she talks about at work, because we're dealing with work things, and I've just always appreciated her, and she's a really sweet person. So to have to think of her in terms of, okay,
group identity.
Yeah, you are this culture, so can I use you in this assignment that demands that I pick somebody based on their culture? It felt kind of gross.
Is that really not racist? I mean, not that Muslim is actually a race per se, but still, I mean, it's very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I've been kind of bothered with this entire ideology movement, where you should belong to a group, that I have never seen an example in history when grouping people into boxes have reduced racism or sexism.
Yeah.
It's a very strange way of doing it.
Well, and as we're seeing, it seems to be making things worse, because now we're getting people who are causing riots. We're getting people who are saying, oh, white men shouldn't be allowed to vote or do any other things because it's their turn to be oppressed. And it's like, okay, why are you looking at it like that? That is a sick way of looking at it. What is your problem?
It's a very racist way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk about slavery, for example, I mean, I'm not American, so I wasn't there. But okay, let's talk about Vikings then. Maybe if an Irish person comes to me and asks for reparations because the Vikings 1,000 years ago plundered their lands or something, none of us were alive then. It doesn't matter for any one of us. So it's a very strange way of claiming this responsibility for what someone did many years ago that may be connected to you in some very vague aspect. It would be like saying, okay, there's a mass murderer over there with brown eyes. You also have brown eyes. Therefore, it's partially your responsibility.
The reparations thing, for Pete's sake. Like, do you know the color of the people that initially sold the Africans to the people who wound up taking them over to America?
It was other Africans, right?
Pro tip, they weren't white.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, slavery has existed everywhere. I'm thinking, slavery is horrible and the history is not exactly perfect, but solely blaming it on one singular population is a very strange way of approaching it.
Yeah.
That's like the definition of having a bias.
Exactly, especially when it wasn't all white people who were responsible for that. Like, one thing in my class has already asked me to take responsibility for the colonization of Canada and for what our ancestors did to the Native Americans. And it's like, okay, so I
thought you were going to say what you did to the polar bears or something. But
I think it's more the moose in Canada.
Yeah. Oh, right. The moose. Yeah. We have elks here.
There we go. But yeah, it's like, my ancestors came from, I think, Croatia and Russia. So I don't see anything how my ancestors had anything to do with how the Native Americans were treated. But Thanks for
No,
that,
you're,
though.
you're thinking about this too realistically. There has to be some connection. I mean, obviously.
Of course,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just because of my white skin color.
Yes, yes, definitely.
My very existence causes oppression to people of other skin colors. So maybe it would just be better if I never existed at all. Oh no.
Yeah, you see, now you're getting it. Man, I should go to this course. I would freaking ace it.
Oh gosh.
Oh, ooh.
But yeah, there are so many things, and I'm just trying to challenge it where I can, as best as I can. Like, for example, are you familiar with the story of Bruce Raymer?
Bruce Raymer? No,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, Bruce Raymer was a guy who was born. He had a twin brother. They were born at the same time, and when he was circumcised, there was actually a terrible accident, and basically his entire penis was cut off. Right.
Ooh.
So they decided the best thing to do would be to try to raise him as female, and they did this in kind of a messed up way. They actually wound up like making him and his brother do sex acts together with him in the bottom
Oh.
position to try and cement his new female role. So I mean,
Naturally, like parents do.
so
Um,
obviously this kind of messed him up a little bit. He eventually discovered that he was supposed to be male, and he took over his male identity again. But it didn't really matter because like his marriage was very troubled, and his relationship with his brother was obviously troubled, and eventually he was divorced, and his brother killed himself, and he eventually also killed himself. It was a very tragic
oh,
story.
Jesus.
It's just kind of an example of how messing with these things can really cause a lot of trauma, right? But
Yeah.
in one of the textbooks for my class, they tried to use Bruce Raymer as an example of an intersex person. And it's like, do you even know
Uh,
what you're talking about here? I actually
oh,
emailed
God.
the managing editor of the publishing company that put out this textbook, and it's like, you realize that there is some serious misinformation in this textbook, right? The way they phrased it is intersex activism has a more recent history. A case involving a Canadian received a great deal of media attention, and then it talks about Bruce Raymer, and he later identified as male, however, and changed his female name of Brenda to David for reasons perhaps only tangentially related to his gender. David committed suicide at age 38. And it's
Oh,
like,
God.
okay, so only tangentially related, eh? You don't think that all of his experiences with his sexual identity, with his gender, later influenced his bad marriage and his decision to commit suicide, right? Like, are you kidding me? So the managing editor did eventually respond to me, and he actually forwarded the email to the person who wrote the chapter in that textbook. So I actually did get to talk to that person, and he's like, "You're right. He's not an intersex person, but the suicide was only tangentially related to his gender." I'm like, okay, you give this guy one paragraph and you don't go over any of his history, and then you have the audacity to say that it's only tangentially related to his sex when that is basically one of the major defining features of his life.
Oh, God. It's a very selective way of looking at it.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're going to change the textbook in later editions. I sure as shit hope so, because that is probably one of the most egregious examples of misinformation I've encountered so far. But, you know,
That's really bad. Jesus Christ.
I did my best to try and change it, and that's basically what I've been doing in this class. Wherever I see anything really bad, I'm not just sitting and letting it go on. I'm trying to actively change things where I can.
Yeah, but that's the good way of doing it, I think. I mean, if something is very wrong, you should speak up about it. I mean, you should always, of course, keep in mind what the consequences could be, but I mean, that's to one extent, one thing I have a hard time accepting with current movements in social justice and such, that it's more of you just speak out about people that are mean instead of teaching people how to stand up to bullies.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what it most of the time is. How you stand up to people that are mean.
Yeah, exactly. But no, and I mean, like, I'm trying to talk about that in my videos where I can, like examples of like what people can actively do to work against this, because if we just keep letting it go, if we just keep our heads down and ignore the problems and just try and get good grades in spite of everything, then nothing is ever going to change. These
No,
guys
then it just gets worse.
yeah, they're going to keep thinking that they have the upper hand. It's just going to get worse. Yeah, so I think that it's important to work hard to challenge it, get through it, but challenge it at the same time. That's the ideal goal.
Yeah, but that's what it should be all about. I mean, university and all those things. Challenging opinions, having your worldview challenged by others with different experiences. I mean, that's how you make sure that your idea you have is actually good. When you actually compare it to other ideas and also have it stand up to scrutiny. If it can't do either of those things, it's a shitty idea.
Yeah,
That's
well, it certainly should be.
yeah. But
Yeah, like one of the rubrics for the assignments for this class is the A plus is, yeah, you have to acknowledge that the personal is political and the professional is political, and the F is an individualistic view of counseling.
oh yeah, I saw that one too.
Yeah, and
That is
it's like,
so
okay, so critical thinking is clearly nowhere to be found in this class.
no, that is so ridiculously biased. I mean, to some degree, I can relate to it in classes I've taken because you kind of what you're always looking for is kind of try to crack what the examiner really wants. With an assignment, for example, like what do they like? It's not particularly political things in my case, but it's more like I had a course in marketing, for example, and you kind of figured out the way he wanted you to structure the case studies and that kind of thing. But this is something completely different. This is a completely different world. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, if you agree with me, you get an A. If you don't agree with me, you get an F. Okay, everybody settled? Okay, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and it's just pointless. It's clearly not putting out like these creative thinkers. It's clearly not putting out people who are going into the world ready to challenge a lot of different views. It's putting out a very narrow-minded set of people who think that there's only one good way to see the world, and it's good to see the world in that way because there's lots of research to support it, even though they're not accepting any research that challenges it, so no wonder.
Yeah, of course. Ugh. Now, I found the most interesting people to discuss with are people that you don't necessarily agree with on all accounts, but that you can always talk with. And that's something I like with, for example, a lot of people. Of course, there are a lot of social justicey people in engineering background as well. But, I mean, speaking in broader context, most of the friends I have from my university days are very easy to talk about because we can sit and talk about really hot potato topics, like Me Too movements, feminism, equality, all these kinds of serious topics that people usually get pretty wired up about without even getting emotional about it. We can just, analyze the things, counter facts. It did a very, very analytical. And even though in the core, I'm not a very analytical person, but I've kind of learned to be analytical over the years. And I really appreciate that way of approaching subjects, that you don't come to it from a very subjective state, or you don't base it entirely off experiences or something like that.
Yeah.
Which makes it a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's the ideal way of doing things because then you get exposed to different ways of seeing the world, and you can learn new perspectives. That's one of my favorite things of debate is not in the winning; it's in
No.
learning other people's perspectives and learning where they come from, so that we can see new ways of seeing the world. I think that's one of the most interesting things about debate because you can learn so much more about other people rather than just focusing constantly on trying to always change their mind because you're always right, because you're so intelligent and you
It's a very
know.
narcissistic worldview.
Exactly. Maybe you don't know everything about the world. Maybe some people have some valid ways of seeing things,
Yeah, definitely. That's something I totally agree with, that the discussion should be towards growing ideas, not necessarily disproving the other one.
Yeah,
And that's
100%.
Yeah, and I think it's very dangerous to take that out of university because that's partially what you do there. I mean, when I've handed in my thesis and stuff like that, the things that made the thesis good were the fact that a lot of people were criticizing it. That they poked holes in it. They tried to find the things I didn't actually build. They found gaps in the references and that kind of thing. And that's what made it watertight in the end.
Yeah, totally. And That's the important thing, because it should be a seeking of the truth. It shouldn't be a I'm setting out to try and confirm my views.
Yeah, it's a very well, you don't grow as a person when you approach it from that way. It's very destructive.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I don't think that I will be able to change things alone. I think that's a little bit grandiose of me to assume so, but I
Well, we're millennials. We should change the world within months. It should go fast.
yeah, exactly. I mean, look at what the social justice warriors have done. They've managed to change the world in only a few years.
Yeah.
Maybe not for the
Oh,
better, but
at least change it. That's good. Set your mark on the world or something.
wow.
No, but that thing with seeking the truth, I actually have. I made a video about that some time ago, maybe half a year ago, and it's a concept I call the circle of life. Sounds very deep and philosophical. But
Yeah.
basically, what it means is that you draw a circle, and everything inside of the circle is all the stuff that you know, and everything outside of the circle is stuff you don't know. And the parameter of the circle is your circumference of ignorance. It's the stuff you know that you don't know, so to say. So for a person with a very small circle, they don't know that they don't know a lot of things.
That's a good
You
way
have
of
to
putting
know,
it.
yeah, you have to know quite a bit to realize that you don't know everything in the world. Because your circle has to grow to a certain extent to realize that in every single subject you can possibly go into the world, there are always going to be experts that pour their entire lives into it.
Yeah,
And I think
totally.
this realization is very important to make because it allows you both to grow as a person, but it also allows you to be critical of your own bias because you can realize that I don't have all the facts in the world. And I think that's the difference between, well, a smart and a less intelligent person. This realization that I am not perfect and I should be open for additional facts if they are proven to be somewhat correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like university used to be a lot more structured in exactly that way that you just said. But
Yeah.
I think that more often lately it's unfortunately about, this is the correct way to see the world and anything else is oppression.
Yeah, it's become very politically,
Yeah.
well, politically tainted and from only one side. So it's not even challenging. It's just an echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see why a lot of people are kind of discarding the importance of education, because a lot of the times it's not education anymore. It's more indoctrination than anything else.
Definitely. It's just an echo chamber of opinions. Ugh. No, don't want nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Well, ideally I would want nothing to do with that, but unfortunately the career goal that I have still requires it, so I must forge
Oh, yeah.
on.
Well, you can see it as two career goals, both getting the degree and also making a lot of content for YouTube. So, I
There
mean,
we
it's a
go.
double win in that case.
Yep, it kind of all works out in the end.
Oh, yes. That's perfect. So do you have anything else you want to talk about, or maybe we should start rounding it up? I think we've been talking for, let's
Yeah,
see,
just
almost an
about,
hour.
yeah. I think that we've had a good amount of time to kind of lay everything out today, but
Oh, yeah, and vent all of our opinions and frustration with the academic world.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I really appreciate your inviting me to talk. This has been really awesome.
Yeah, it's been really awesome to have you here. I hope we can do more like this in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan. So I hope all the people at home and families, obviously, and children watching this have a pleasant day, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Bye.